Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei is making some big waves in the AI community and beyond with releasing a massive 15,000 word essay that looks at a very optimistic picture of AI's future impact on society. Now, he outlines in this essay a very bold vision that's quite inspiring, but it's also raising eyebrows and sparking debate about the realistic potential and risks of AI. So, this essay is titled Machines of Loving Grace, and it has the subtitle How AI Could Transform the World for the Better. Now, the title of this essay immediately gives you a footnote because, like, your first question is, what does this title mean? It goes to a poem by a poet, Richard Brautigan, titled All Watched Over by Machines of Loving Grace. And this basically is a short poem that envisions the perfect harmonious existence between technology, humanity, and nature. The essay itself then dives into some radical predictions that Amodei has for how this positive future could play out with AI. So we're going to talk about a lot of them, but a few that really jump out, which he goes in depth into over literally thousands of words. First up, he kind of basically predicts that what he calls, quote, powerful AI, he says he doesn't like the term AGI, but he's basically talking about extremely competent, extremely powerful AI. He predicts it could arrive as soon as 2026. And literally in his definition, which he outlines, powerful AI is AI that surpasses Nobel Prize winners in most fields in terms of intelligence. It's AI that can engage in actions, can go accomplish tasks autonomously, and potentially even collaborate with millions of copies of itself to achieve goals. So once we have this powerful AI, Amodei then predicts huge impacts on a bunch of key areas. He decides to highlight a handful that are really relevant to him, in his opinion, though he admits beyond these few, there's also a ton of other impacts. So he focuses on biology, neuroscience, kind of global economic development, governance, and the future of work. So I'm just going to list out a few of the more radical predictions. There are literally tons of them in there. But for instance, he claims that AI could cure most diseases, eliminate cancers, and halt Alzheimer's within 7 to 12 years, and predicts AI develop drugs for mental health conditions within 5 to 10 years. He predicts AI could cause the average human lifespan to double to 150 years. He believes AI could solve world hunger and reverse climate change, and that it could also cause dramatic economic growth in developing countries. And he suggests Sub-Saharan Africa's GDP, for instance, could end up matching China's current level within a decade. Now, additionally, Amodei kind of acknowledges that AI is going to disrupt the job market, but he believes humans will retain some comparative advantage for at least a little while, where we're basically able to complement AI's capabilities. But he also says that, quote, in the long run, this AI is going to become so broadly effective and so cheap that at some point, basically, our current economic setup will no longer make sense. So, Paul, that's just kind of a taste of all the stuff he goes into here. There's a lot to unpack here. I'd say let's start at the beginning. Like, why is Amodei's perspective on this subject important? Which parts of this essay strike you as particularly worth paying attention to?
Just a reminder who he is to your point, like why does he matter? Why does his opinion matter? So he led the team at OpenAI that was building GPT-2 and then GPT-3. After doing that, prior to doing that, he was a senior research scientist at Google Brain for about a year. But after leading the team building GPT-3, he saw the opportunity to build a language model company, to build a frontier model company. He saw a window of opportunity to do this. He left OpenAI in 2021, took about 10% of the staff with him, founded Anthropic. So he is the co-founder and CEO. They have raised $7.6 billion to date. We talked about them in one of the recent podcast episodes that they're rumored to be raising again at a $40 billion valuation is what's being talked about. So when we look out to the companies that will build the largest, most generally capable models, there's probably five. We have OpenAI, obviously. We have Google, Meta, Anthropic, and xAI, Elon Musk's company, which we'll talk more about in a few minutes. There's some other players building frontier models. People are going to build smaller models, like Mistral, is kind of in the running right now. Probably won't last. It's going to be really, really hard to raise at the levels these companies are going to raise at. So those 5 appear to be the primary ones that are going to build the biggest models. So what Dario says, like, we should care about, and what he thinks happens next matters to us, because if that's what he is envisioning, he's one of the 5 main people that are kind of building the future. And as we talked about in like previous episodes, going back to last year, he doesn't talk much. Like, he doesn't do many interviews. He's not like Sam Altman. He's not active on Twitter. Like, it's hard to get at where Dario is at, but he does show up every once in a while and either do long form podcast episodes like with Dwarkesh, or he drops an essay of 15,000 words and lets us know what he's up to. So, I think right away in the opening, he makes an important point. So he says, people sometimes draw the conclusion that I'm a pessimist or a doomer who thinks AI will be mostly bad or dangerous. Now, keep in mind, they supported SB 1047. So Anthropic was for the legislation that we talked a lot about that was going on in California that eventually got vetoed by the governor. So that's why he's saying, like, people think I'm like a doomer, or I'm the one that's trying to get regulation. He said, I don't think that at all. In fact, one of the main reasons for focusing on risks is that they're the only thing standing between us and what I see as a fundamentally positive future. I think that most people are underestimating just how radical the upside of AI could be, just as I think most people are underestimating how bad the risks could be. So he says that in this essay, he wanted to sketch out what he would say, quote, a world with powerful AI might look like if everything goes right. And then, as you said, he focused on kind of these 5 core areas because he has a background in neuroscience and biology. He has a reasonable background in economic development, and then just kind of his grand visions for peace and governance and work and meeting. So you touched a little bit on, the powerful AI. We've talked so many times about this. Like, we can't agree on what AGI is, and then we have some people who don't even want to use the term AGI. So now we've got powerful AI in the mix. And so I thought it was interesting how he kind of broke it out. So he said, I have in mind an AI model likely similar to today's LLMs in form, though it might be based on a different architecture, meaning maybe not the transformer, or a new version of the transformer is kind of what he's implying there, might involve several interacting models and might be trained differently. So these are a lot of like mights for something that he thinks is very near term, which I immediately found kind of interesting and would imply to me that maybe they already have some new approaches to architectures kind of thing. So then you touched on the Nobel Prize winner thing. Now, the interesting thing here is, and again, I'm going to come back to his timelines in a moment, but I think it's really important to set the stage of where he's envisioning this. So smarter than a Nobel Prize winner across most relevant fields. On a recent episode, we talked about Google DeepMind's levels of AGI. Their levels of AGI, which we'll put the link to in the show notes, is 0, no AI, all the way up to level 5, which is superhuman, outperforming 100% of humans. Level 4 is virtuoso, at least 99th percentile of skilled adults. He's basically saying that this powerful AI will be level 4 to level 5 in Google DeepMind's levels of AGI. So that's an important distinction. He says it'll be, this is my words describing, like summarizing, multimodal and agentic. So he specifically says, quote, it has all the interfaces available to a human working virtually, including text, audio, video, mouse and keyboard control, and internet access. So it can do everything we can do in an online world, basically. It can engage in any actions, communications, remote operations, enabled with this interface, including taking actions on the internet, taking or giving directions to humans, ordering materials, directing experiments, watching videos, etc. So again, we're going to come back to his timeline. Keep in mind what he thinks this powerful AI is. This is a significant advancement. The next one I summarized again as advanced reasoning and agentic. So in his words, it does not have just passively answer questions. It can be given tasks and take hours, days, or weeks to complete, and then go off and does those tasks autonomously in the way a smart employee would, asking for clarification as necessary. It can control existing physical tools, robots, and laboratory equipment through a computer. this is an important one. The resources used to train the model can be repurposed to run millions of instances of it. And the model can absorb information and generate actions at roughly 10 to 100 times human speed. It may, however, be limited by response time of the physical world or of software it interacts with. Now, again, this is starting to sound really sci-fi to people. If you're not like following along really closely with what's going on and kind of the frontiers here, this is starting to sound sci-fi. But the people who have been paying close attention, this all aligns. This lines up with the situational awareness paper from Leopold. It lines up with what we're hearing from OpenAI. Like nothing I've seen here is anything new to me because this is what they're all talking about. And then the one that gets kind of crazy is each of these millions of copies can act independently on unrelated tasks, or if needed, can all work together in the same way humans would collaborate, perhaps with different subpopulations fine-tuned to especially good at particular tasks. Now, this brings in the OpenAI levels of AI we've talked about. So in OpenAI's levels of AI, we have level 1 chatbots, level 2 reasoners, which we got a preview of with O1, level 3 agents, which we're seeing demonstrations of right now, and in a year or two, they might be reliable. Level 4 innovators, that's where they're coming up with new science, basically. Level 5 organizations, dozens, hundreds, thousands, millions of agents working together to run a company, which brings us to the Ilya Sutskever quote from July 2023 that we've talked about, where he said, "The way I think about the AI of the future is not as someone as smart as you or as smart as me, but as an automated organization. Its constituent AIs would work and communicate at high speeds like bees in a hive. A single such AI organization would be as powerful as 50 Apples or Googles." Ilya and Dario worked together at OpenAI. They certainly probably shared ideas around these things. I'm going to come back to Jensen Huang's quote about this in a minute, but what Dario then finishes with is he thinks of this future as a country of geniuses in a data center. So when is he envisioning all of this? Well, as you said, he thinks as early as 2026. So everything I just outlined, if he's envisioning that by 2026, that means nothing we just talked about does he see as impossible with 1 to 2 generations of models from now. That GPT-6, Claude 5, they're seeing a scientifically possible path to achieving everything that was just outlined. So that brought me back last night, and again, why I was like now having trouble sleeping on a Sunday night, to episode 94, which you'll remember well, Mike. We will put the link to episode 94. Episode 94 is when we talked about Anthropic's AI safety levels. So this is when we went into the Ezra Klein interview with Dario Amodei. And in that interview, they talked about these safety levels. So they have ASL1, or AI safety level 1, refers to systems which pose no meaningful catastrophic risk. Like example, 2018 LLMs is how they kind of. Level 2 is present large language models. This is where they would put Claude and Gemini and things like that. Refers to systems that show early signs of dangerous capabilities, but they can kind of control it. Level 3, significantly higher risk, refers to systems that substantially increase the risk of catastrophic misuse. So this is, we didn't know yet. This is kind of, they're like, these are theoretical levels at this point. And the level 4 is speculative and higher. It's not defined yet. Like we don't even know how to measure it. So in the interview that we talked about on episode 94, Ezra said, when you imagine how many years away just roughly ASL 3 is and how many years away ASL 4 is, you've thought a lot about this exponential scaling curve. If you just had to guess, what are we talking about? And he said, yeah, I think ASL 3 could easily happen this year or next. I think ASL 4, at which point Ezra Klein interrupted and said, oh, Jesus Christ. And then Dario said, no, I told you, I'm a believer in exponentials. I think ASL 4 could happen anywhere between 2025 and 2028, which Ezra then said, if you don't believe these models will ever become so powerful, they become dangerous, fine. But you do believe that. How do you imagine this actually playing out? To which Dario said, look, I don't have an answer for that. Like I'm one of the significant number of players trying to navigate this. Many are well-intentioned, some are not. I have a limited ability to affect it. So the reason I bring this back up is because everything in this essay continues to imply that the models they're building will be ASL 3 or 4,
Mm.
their own levels of threat, basically, within the next 1 to 2 years. And that interview was from, I think, April of this year is when we talked about
I
that
think
one.
so, yeah.
Yeah, so we're talking about like 5 months later or so, 6 months later, he's continuing on this path. And so I don't know, like his vision for where this goes, the way I think about this, to kind of summarize, I guess, is there's a handful of entrepreneurs and AI researchers who are envisioning and building the future. As Dario said, he's one of them. He doesn't think he has that much ability to affect this, and yet they're the ones building the models. So this is why Mike and I are spending time on this kind of thing. The article is out there. Like, it feels weird when you're reading it. It feels too sci-fi, but it's not. Like, they're making decisions right now, and the paths that they choose to pursue will affect all of us, all of our kids, all of our communities, like our businesses. All of it's going to be affected by the decision these 5 companies are making. And so what they think, say, and do matters. Now, I choose to be optimistic about the future, but the reality is there's a bunch of known risks and there's a bunch of unknown risks. And so the only way we can see through this is by being informed about it and
Mm.
then being intentional at our individual levels, like the best we can, in choosing a responsible application of AI in our business, in our industry, in our career, in our schools. Because I do truly believe, like Dario, that the future can be abundant and incredible if we choose to be responsible and human-centered. And I still have concerns that the 5 main companies that are driving the future of humanity, I don't know that they're really that aligned on what that looks like.
Mm.
Because we can't agree on what AGI is. We can't even call it the same thing anymore. And so I don't know, man. Like, this was, like I said, this is a hard one
Yeah.
to prep for, because this was a lot to think about on a Sunday night. And then to go back to that episode 94, which I found kind of unnerving at the time.
Yeah. I think one thing that jumped out to me is you and I have been following some version of the AGI conversation long before it became in vogue to start talking about. But if he had published this essay 3 years ago, it would have been laughed out of off the
Nobody would pay
internet.
attention.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like Moore's Law for everything from Sam Altman in
Yeah.
2021. People just ignored it
Yeah.
outside of the AI research community. Like, it was just too out there. And I agree with you. I think too many business leaders, government leaders, educational system leaders will look at this and think it's crazy and
Yeah.
it's sci-fi and it's not something they have to think about. All we're saying is they think you should be thinking about it. Like, they think that we are within 1 to 2 years of this being a reality. And that can be incredible over the next decade. It can lead to all these incredible breakthroughs in biology and, society, and solving hunger and diseases, and all of these things can happen, but they are not promised. Like, if everything goes right, is basically what he said. This is an essay of if everything goes right.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so he spends all his time thinking about how it goes wrong to try and ensure that we have the best possible future. But he even at the end says, I'm not even sure that this is the future most people would want. It's just what he thinks is a beautiful future.
So to kind of wrap this topic up here, I guess like the burning question I have is, if you kick off your essay saying, I believe in the next handful of years, we're going to have AIs that are Nobel Prize winners functionally at many, if not most things. How do you not spend half this essay talking about the impact on everyone else's work who's not a Nobel Prize winner? Like, I just found it very hard to imagine in a world like that humans would have any comparative advantage for a second.
Well, he does address that, because the economy and work is the one at the end. And he said, let's see, he started that off with AIs doing everything, how will humans have meaning? For that matter, how will they survive economically? And then he basically says, like, hey, this is kind of the one I have the least to say about, like that I know the least about. But he said it's worth saying a few words while keeping in mind that the brevity of this section is not at all meant to be taken as a sign that I don't take these issues seriously. On the contrary, it's a sign of a lack of clear answers. So he gets into like the meaning of humans and the meaning of work. And yeah, he's basically just saying, like, it's going to get strange, and I don't really know what to tell you, but I think the GDP will go up dramatically, and that should create more opportunities for people to do work. And even if they're only doing 10% of what they used to do, they should still get some meaning from that. It's very clear they don't know. And again, Sam Altman has asked point blank about this. He doesn't know. Like, this is my biggest concern is it's like not to, like, I never want to create this, like, again, fear factor about any of this, but the reality is they all think that within 2 years, the economy looks very different. Jobs look very different. And yet none of them have an answer for what that means or even a reasonable idea. Like,
Right.
there's no policy ideas other than universal basic income. Like, that's the thing. And he even threw that out. He's like, maybe it's that, or maybe it's not. I don't know. Like, how is that not the thing that we're not spending more time studying? Like,
That
I
yeah.
just don't get it.
Yeah, that's kinda what I'm getting at is like, yeah, there's I totally respect this is not an easy problem to solve, but it's like, if it's coming this soon,
Yeah.
we are
Let's
nowhere
go.
near having
Somebody,
Yeah,
some of the government, Google,
mhm,
Microsoft, I don't care who it is, somebody needs to make this their thing. Like, we gotta figure this out. We need deep studies about the future of the economy. Not we can't be looking backwards. That's what economists do. They look
right,
backwards to try and figure out the future. That is not going to help us here.
and we know some of those people are listeners, so I hope
Yeah,
they hear this
yeah.
episode.
Somebody do something. We'll help. Like, call me. Like, I will do whatever we can, but I don't have the money it's going to take to do this.